Uncanny X-Men number 187 is titled Wraithkill, and it's a pretty wild issue. The Dire Wraiths have stormed Eagle Plaza, and they are doing their damnedest to kill Forge and will have no mercy on anyone who gets in their way. The whole issue is basically one big battle between the X-Men and the Dire Wraiths, but the pacing is partitioned really well, and it's between high energy fight scenes and slower introspective character building scenes. The cover art promises some mutant on alien action, and we certainly get a lot of it, but it's never at the sacrifice of plot. It's not just a lot of fighting, it's fighting with purpose and with reason, and even with some character growth too. There are also some overarching through lines that get woven into the story, like Storm adjusting to powerlessness and Forge finding balance between mysticism and technology, and of course their pained relationship with each other. But all of it fits seamlessly into the fabric of this issue's framework, and it feels as though the story couldn't be told without them. It's not entirely an easy, straightforward issue to read. It kind of goes off the rails a bit with like a sudden psychic merging of souls between the four main characters and one mysterious other, and that's pretty much over as soon as it begins, and it's not really explained how or why it happened. I can't explicitly tell if any of the characters are really changed by the merging, so it felt like a pointless complication that didn't need to happen, but I'm hopeful that it leads to something. I'm sure it's a build-up to something greater that will have implications in a future issue, but I didn't really get it here, and it was the only part of this story that really detached me from the otherwise clear-cut pacing and storytelling. I can't say that this issue is one of my all-time favorite ones, but it's certainly not bad either. I think that I give it a hard time because I don't really see the Dire Wraiths as X-villains, and so this issue just feels like the X-Men are fighting a battle that isn't really theirs to fight. It feels like Marvel is trying to make the Dire Wraiths and Rom happen, when in reality they should just stop because Rom and the Dire Wraiths aren't going to happen. Marvel never learns this lesson of not force-feeding us through editorial mandates, though, and it continues to try to manipulate our tastes in future years. The most notoriously recent one for us is when they tried to cancel the X-Men in favor of the Inhumans. Inhumans was getting its own TV show, and Fox wasn't budging on the X movie rights, and blah blah blah, money, money, money. Luckily, that blew up in Marvel's faces though, and no matter how hard they pushed, the Inhumans could not eclipse X-Men as fan favorite franchise. They eventually let the Inhumans crawl back to their blue area of the moon in shame, and now we are in a golden era of X content with 12 new series on the shelves. Anyway, this issue may not be a favorite read of mine, but it's still a good read, and there's lots of stuff to enjoy in it. Here are my highlights from Uncanny X-Men number 187.
Storm.
This issue marks Storm's first adventure in powerlessness. Her powers were stripped from her by Forge's neutralizer gun back in Uncanny X-Men number 185, and she has been coming to terms with her new normal ever since. It took her a while to find herself in the last issue, but she eventually got there, and now she's acting like her old heroic self again. This issue showed just how much of a crutch Storm's powers were for her. She can't rely on them to help her survive anymore, and she realizes now how dependent she was on them. Luckily for her though, she has friends like Wolverine who prepared her for a situation like this, and she recalls a time when he taught her the ropes of armed combat. I hate seeing Storm use something as primitive as a gun, but I think that's kind of the point. Wolverine mentions that no one would expect Storm to use a gun, and it's true. Even just the sight of her holding it completely disorients me from the Storm that I know, so it's definitely doing the trick of catching me off guard. She may not be able to control the natural elements anymore, but she can still do wonders with the element of surprise. But navigating the depowered life is not just about tapping into new skills. Storm also has to change her baseline way of thinking and how she approaches situations. There's a scene when she lures a Dire Wraith outside into the snowy cold, and she ends up nearly freezing to death herself out there. She's only wearing a light summer frock in this issue, and it's totally unsuitable for a blizzard. In the past, this never would have mattered though, because her body adjusts to temperatures naturally as a byproduct of her weather control powers. But now, without her powers, she's at the mercy of the same freezing temperatures as the rest of us are, and she has to learn to put that into consideration when she makes decisions. There's a gross panel in this scene that happens after she grabs a pipe to fight off a hellhound. Her hands freeze to the metal and she literally has to tear her skin away in order to pry them loose. Ugh, it's just so gross. And it never would have happened to her if she still had her powers, but that's just like more evidence of her new reality, and so she's gotta find a way to adapt to these new limitations. The one upside of Storm being depowered is that it's helping her feel alive. It's like she's feeding her soul with new energy. I can see like old unused neural networks of her brain that are suddenly firing up and sparking to life. She's doing things that she's never had to do before, and the new experiences are giving her a new lease on life. It's most apparent in this issue after the Dire Wraiths manipulate the elevator cables to grab hold of her. She's turned upside down and is separated from Nazé, and even loses her gun in the process, so she's really got to do some quick thinking to get out of it or else she's toast. Storm is resourceful and barely misses a beat getting herself untangled. She feels exalted at having survived a life or death situation without having to rely on her powers. She says it reminds her of her time as a bad girl in Japan with Yukio, and I gotta say, that's totally the vibe that I was getting too, even before she mentioned it. This issue really shows how competent Storm can be on the field without her powers. She doesn't really have time to acknowledge how well she's doing because she's too busy fighting for her life, but I doubt that she would have patted herself on the back anyway, even if she could have, because that's just not Storm's style. She definitely deserves some kudos though, because not just anyone would actively seek out and engage with an alien threat with only their wits and natural strength to defend themselves, especially not in the service of protecting someone who just betrayed you. Storm is swiftly reunited with Forge after their blowout from last issue, and the hurt is still raw for her, but she commits to her role as a hero and protects him. Things are awkward between them, and Storm doesn't trust Forge in the slightest, but in her heart, she knows that she could never live with herself if she just let him become alien dust. She also wants revenge against him on her terms, so to see someone else try to take him out doesn't really jive with her long-term goals. Oh, the complicated lives of mutants.
Forge.
Forge is the Dire Wraiths' main target in this issue, and my god, they hold nothing back. He's got Dire Wraiths, Deathwings, and Hellhounds all in his penthouse vying for him. Forge is the only one on Earth with the power to stop the Dire Wraiths, so that's why they want him dead. His mutant ability lets him create any weapon, like the power neutralizer which the Dire Wraiths fear, and it could effectively end their invasion of Earth before they even really get it started. This issue starts to get to the heart of Forge as a character. Apart from his love-hate problems with Storm, his other big storyline is in regards to him rejecting his past. He comes from a mystical, tribal shaman background, but he's turned away from it all in favor of machines and technology. The comics haven't revealed why he's done this yet. They've been hinting that something regrettable happened the last time he used his magic, and it's clear that there are forces at play pulling him in both directions, some back toward his mystical roots, and others forward with his new inventions. Nazé acts as the anchor to his Cheyenne tribe, whereas people like Val Cooper and the government are the ones pushing him to be more involved with tech. Both of his skill sets come in handy in this issue, which is great, but I don't think it does anything to help him consolidate these two competing aspects of himself. If anything, I think that seeing both tech and magic be effective in their own rights complicates things even more for him in deciding which path he should focus on. The first evidence to support his tech-focused path is when Forge is momentarily incapacitated after the psychic soul merging. The Dire Wraiths think that they have the jump on him, so they go to attack, but as they approach, his security system flares to life and starts defending him. For all their vaunted power, the Dire Wraiths are surprisingly vulnerable to lasers and gunpowder, and Forge's machinery really does a number on them. But then there's a different scene where Forge uses magic to get the drop on the Dire Wraiths. One of the aliens casts a glamour over Storm, hoping to trick Forge into killing her and disguising her as a Dire Wraith, and he has to tap into his spirit sight to show him who Storm really is. That's him using his sorcery and getting results that his tech couldn't help him with. Even later, when it looks like dozens of Dire Wraiths have suddenly appeared, Forge's magic eye does it again, and he's able to see that most of what the X-Men are now fighting are actually just illusions. He's using his sorcery for the first time in years, and even though he swears that it isn't reliable for some reason, it seems to be doing the trick here. There's no way to say which direction is the right path for Forge, be it magic or tech. They are both aspects of who he is, so it's really about him integrating these two halves to make himself whole. He needs to come to terms with whatever trauma happened to him in the past that turned him away from magic. Somehow, he's got to find a way to turn his past failure into a lesson that can be informing his present and better shaping his future. I don't see him turning away from tech anytime soon, so the sooner he comes to terms with this, the better off and more wholly complete he'll be. I think Forge will only ever be as strong as his resolve in this respect, and being divided like the way he currently is leaves him way too vulnerable and susceptible to enemy attack and manipulation.
Dire Wraiths.
Even though the Dire Wraiths aren't really my cup of tea in terms of X-Men villains, I do like them as overall characters, and we get to see how formidable the Wraiths really are in this issue. They use a lot of different kinds of sorcery, like shape-shifting and casting illusions and object manipulation and generating shields. It's fun seeing aliens use magic, especially ugly-looking aliens that aren't humanoid in the least. There was a time in Marvel history when Doctor Strange was looking for someone new to take up the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme. There were lots of people nominated on the ballot, including some X-peeps like Magic and Spiral and Selene. Brother Voodoo was eventually named the successor, but after seeing what these Dire Wraiths can do, I kind of wish that one of them had been in the running too. It would have been crazy to see a Dire Wraith as Marvel's next Sorcerer Supreme, and I am all for it. In this issue, the Dire Wraiths are ridiculously murderous. They are here to kill Forge, but first they get rid of his security guard, and then they also try to maim Storm and Nazé. There's no talking out your problems with them. Either you're a Wraith, or you're dust. The one thing I will say about these Wraiths is that they don't seem to have very strong defenses. Many times throughout this issue, we see them get pulverized by a mere gun blast. First, Forge's automated security destroys one that teleports in, then Nazé shoots them dead a few times, and then Forge's security yet again gives them trouble. For such a powerful species, they certainly are one and done in terms of HP. Maybe that's part of who they are though. Like, since they're mystically endowed, they are super susceptible to inventions of science and technology, and so that's why things like guns and lasers are like the best offense to use against them. I don't know, if that was the case, then I think Val Cooper would have just unleashed the military against them to ward off their invasion instead of cooking up a deal with Forge, so I doubt my theory is correct. If they aren't inherently weak against science and technology, then maybe it's just a testament as to how powerful Forge's security tech really is. Even though these aliens seem super well educated to me, they are a bit naive in terms of their attack strategies. They keep getting bested in fairly easy ways, like triggering security alarms and falling for holographic projections. They haven't spent a lot of time on Earth as far as I know, so I guess they aren't really familiar with the various ways that humans defend themselves. But sending in a huge horde of their infantry without doing their homework really puts them at a disadvantage in this invasion. I don't know how much of their species has been depleted after losing this battle with the X-Men, but if they weren't facing extinction levels before, they're certainly on track to it now, because it looks like so many of them died. Even though they came into Eagle Plaza sorcery ablazing, it wasn't enough to best these resourceful humans, and so the Dire Wraiths had better retreat and regroup and reconsider before attacking Earth again.
Nazé.
Nazé is very suspect in this issue. He saves Storm after her initial fracas with the Dire Wraith and claims to have had a dream that warned him something terrible was going to happen to Forge, hence why he showed up out of the blue. Storm buys it and they team up as they go to rescue Forge, but they get separated and Nazé goes hunting on his own. I don't know a whole lot about Nazé. I think the most we're told about him in these early issues is that he's a shaman from Forge's tribe, and that he taught Forge everything he knew in terms of sorcery and magic. He's the one who's trying to get Forge to reclaim his roots, and he's hinting at something terrible to come, though we don't know what that is. Apart from saving Storm a few times, Nazé doesn't really have any other explicit involvement in this issue, except for what appears to be like a subtle corruption that creeps over him. Nazé is the only one who doesn't exactly seem to be himself anymore after the psychic soul merging between him and Forge and a Dire Wraith and a mysterious other. But then again, we don't really know anything about Nazé anyway, so it's kind of hard to imply that he's changed when we don't even really have a baseline set for him yet. But I think that something fishy did happen to him because he just abandons the crew in the heat of the big battle against the Dire Wraiths totally unannounced. It feels out of character because literally the only reason he came to Eagle Plaza in the first place was to save Forge, so why abandon him now? He's packing a big gun that he's ready to use, but when the time comes, he's nowhere to be seen, and that's a little sus to me. It turns out that he snuck off to Forge's Eagle's Nest, which is basically like Forge's Sanctum Sanctorum, so the nexus of all his power. And he's doing something, well, we don't really know what he's doing, but the tone that the comic uses to describe him while he's there suggests that he's not doing something very pleasant. He looks like he's been possessed with those darkened eyes, and either he's siphoning off Forge's power for himself, or he's manipulating it as a means to achieving his own end. At the end of this issue, after all the Wraiths have been destroyed, Storm wonders where Nazé is, and then, like clockwork, some Shadowbeings appear from out of nowhere and start attacking the team. To me, that heavily implies that Nazé was casting a spell to summon these Shadowbeings and attack the X-Men, meaning that either Nazé is now possessed by whatever psychic merging happened earlier, or that Nazé was a bad guy all along. I like both those twists. I feel like there's a lot of juice in Nazé being cast as a secret villain who's looking for Forge to re-embrace his mystical ways only so that he can use Forge in his own evil machinations.
Colossus and Rogue.
Colossus and Rogue aren't in this issue for very long. They arrive just in time for the big boss battle at the end, which is kind of like a trope for the X-Men during this era. I've been noticing that when neither Colossus nor Rogue are the focus of an issue, and if there's a battle at the end, then suddenly one or both of them can be seen smashing through a wall with reinforcements to help save the day. There's a funny Instagram feed that highlights a different X-trope every day, and I wonder if they've noticed this too. I feel like X-trope wall smash has gotta be a thing, right? Anyway, Colossus and Rogue show up and join the fray in battle, and even though they don't make a ton of difference in terms of evening out the odds, it was nice to see more of the X-Men on the page by this point. The comics have felt very Storm and Forge heavy over the past couple issues, so seeing more of the cast of characters is definitely welcomed. I think the main reason why these two show up from a narrative perspective is to readdress Storm's depowerment. Colossus questions why she's using a gun instead of a lightning bolt to fight off the Wraiths, and so Storm spills the beans on what happened to her, and Rogue immediately feels guilty because she knows the power neutralizer was actually meant to be used on her. I really love that moment for Rogue. She feels guilty, but it's not Storm who's laying down the blame. She's putting it on herself, and that means that she really does care about the X-Men and is starting to see them as her family. Family members sacrifice for each other, and Rogue seeing what Storm gave up for her really hammers home what Rogue must mean to Storm and to the X-Men as a whole. She's an important member, and even though Rogue lacks the self-confidence to see herself as heroic, the others can see that quality within her, and they'll do anything they can to protect her. I'm sure Storm would never call it out to Rogue that the only reason she's depowered in the first place is because she was trying to save her, but I kind of hope that we do get to see that conversation between them. I feel like it would be worthwhile and one that would help to strengthen this Storm and Rogue relationship that the narrative team has been building lately. I mean, I think I know how it would go. Rogue would just be super guilty and put all the blame on herself, and then Storm would deflect and say it's no one's fault but Forge's. So really nothing exciting or tantalizing overall, but still a conversation that I think needs to be had in order to bring the storyline full circle.
Panels.
Here are some of the fun panels that I liked in this issue. There was nothing really subtly funny to highlight, but hey, them's the breaks sometimes.
5.
Storm fighting back against a Dire Wraith with just her wits and some heals. She's a smart cookie to use every weapon at her disposal, and even though she actually calls out later in the issue that her heals are holding her back and she ditches them in favor of going barefoot, I'm happy that we got to see her use them in a little bit of action at the beginning, and for Storm to see that they aren't totally useless.
4.
The security guard turning to dust after the Dire Wraith absorbs him. Yikes, this looks harsh. It makes me feel like something that would happen out of Hellraiser, especially the way the yellow boxes describe it. A moment of exquisite agony and then oblivion. The Dire Wraiths must have such sights to show us.
3.
Storm covered in wraith guck. It's right after Nazé shoots the brains out of the alien that's attacking her, and though she may be safe, there's now a part of her that will never feel clean again, and it's right there on the side of her head. What a day to wear the mohawk.
2.
Rom and Starshine showing up from out of nowhere to save the X-Men. When this moment happened in the middle of battle, I was like, what? You've gotta be kidding me. They turn out to be holograms that were just casted by Forge, which is good because it would have been lazy writing if they had literally just flown in to save the day. But the hologram tricks the Dire Wraiths into shooting themselves, so it was definitely worth the momentary confusion.
1.
Storm being ambushed by a Dire Wraith in the rain. I think this panel looks really cool and shows how imposing the Wraiths can be. Their anatomy can sometimes come across as goofy, especially with their long, thin razor tongues. But I think the scaling of this panel really goes to show just how scary one would be to see it in actual real life. My favorite noise lettering in this issue is the fading pom 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 of the Dire Wraith trying desperately to get back inside after Storm locks it out in the blistering cold. The way the sound just slowly dies off heavily implies that the Dire Wraith is following suit, and it eats away at Storm a little bit because she just knowingly killed something and didn't even think twice about it. It was a desperate move for her, but also a smart one, because if she didn't kill the Dire Wraith, then the Dire Wraith would most certainly have killed her. Now that's a dire situation.
Fashion.
There aren't really any solid fashion moments in this issue, but I'll give it up to Storm's Rambo couture. After she and Nazé find the remains of Forge's security guard, Storm takes his discarded gun into her possession and straps a whole belt of ammunition around her chest. There's something so off in seeing Storm decked out this way. It's like militant and war-hungry, neither of which terms aptly describe Storm at all. But I think because she wears the belt as a bandolier across her chest and it hangs like a sash around her flimsy white summer frock, it gives me like a sexy huntress vibe. It's like she's going to spend a day at the park, but she's also prepared to hunt for her snacks. I think it's fun in like a makeshift, momentary, panicky sort of way, and definitely not a sustainable costume in the least, but it does go to show that there's still an aspect of fashion to be had even in the most dire of circumstances. Yes, I did make that joke twice now.
Ads.
This issue, I'm highlighting the official Stuntmen's Association t-shirt ad. Have you ever been so thrilled by action movie stunts that you wanted to wear a t-shirt bearing their organization's name and logo? Well, now you can with this great offer. No, it's not the shirt that the stunt people wore in the movies. It's the shirts they wear while they're waiting to be in the movie. So even though you may think the shirt can help you survive a burning vehicle accident or a fall from a very tall building, it's really just meant to be worn while eating donuts and waiting for your call time. Shirt colors come in black, light blue, or red, and they cost between $9.95 and $12.95 depending on your preferred style, t-shirt or baseball length. I love a good 3/4 length sleeve, but without at least some measurements here, how am I supposed to gauge if we're dealing with the same sizes? My medium might be your small, and etc. and etc. I hate ordering clothing online because of fit issues, and Lord help me if I ever have to order it via a comic book ad. Without a return policy, I guarantee the only stunts I'll be pulling will be turning the page.
X-Mail.
Yet again, there is no X-Mail in this issue. Does anyone out there know why some issues have X-Mail and other issues don't? I literally thought that every comic book had this page at the end, but it doesn't seem to be the case at all, not even on an alternating issue schedule. I doubt that they didn't have enough letters to print, so it's gotta be something editorial, right? Maybe they just ran out of characters who were willing to be used as mail call staff. I bet the next time we see the letters page, they'll be answered by Marvel staff instead of by an X-Man. Just you wait and see. Well, that's it for this issue. Thanks for tuning in. Feel free to subscribe for more of these reviews, or check out any of my other social media accounts for a varied assortment of X content. Videos, blog posts, panel scans, and more can also be found at my website, greatxmentations.com. Thanks again for stopping by today, and be sure to come back soon for more Great X-Mentations.